My name is May Margaret Scales. I was born in Tippah County in Blue Mountain, Mississippi, June 13, 1953. I'm proud to say I have one sister and three brothers. And they all reside in the city of New Albany. Okay. My parents are, father's name is Charlie Graham McKenzie. My mother's name is Marsha McKenzie. My sister, who is older than I am, her name is Charlene, and I have three brothers that are younger than I am. My older brother's name is Brody Graham. Second brother, Willie Thomas, and my youngest brother's name is Baron Wayne McKenzie. My mother's family lived in Tippah County, where I was born, and my father's family lives in Benton County, which is Ashland. My father's parents lived in Ashland, Mississippi, and my mother's parents lived in Blue Mountain, Mississippi. My mother worked as a maid, and my father worked as a janitor, and as far back as I can remember, he was a janitor at Shands Hospital. It doesn't exist anymore, but that's where he worked. And then later on, he he was transferred to the owner of the hospital, Dr. Shands. He worked at his house as a butler and any other services that were needed around the house. My mother's father was a farmer, and her mother was a housewife. And my father's parents, my father's mother was a housewife, and his dad had a skill. He was a bird dog trainer, and he also farmed, and he trained horses. So he had lots of skills. I remember when growing up, visiting their home, there was always a dog at their home. As a matter of fact, I'm like a storyteller. I remember the house was fenced, and there was a gate that led outside to the other parts of the farm. One day, he had a dog there that he was training that was named Brownie. Well, Brownie caught me outside that fence. And what I thought as a little girl wearing high heels and a tight skirt. Well, I had my father's youngest sister, her heels. I was wearing her heels. And the dog caught me outside of the fence. And when he saw me, I panicked. And I ran, but guess what? I did not lose those shoes. There was a club, and what my grandfather did, trained the dogs of the men that were members of this club, and he would even go with them to, I think you call them hunts. I remember my father talking about stories of going with him as a little boy, but that's what he did. He was a bird dog trainer, and he also trained horses. So that's one of my memories of him is the dogs and the horses. As a matter of fact, it was the first horse I'd ever ridden on was growing up, on the back of the horse with my father. But my mother told me that we lived in Nashville, Tennessee. But the only, as far as I can go back in my mind, is New Albany, living on, I think it was Baker Street, I'm not sure, but I can remember seeing myself sitting on the steps of back of the house, and memories of when we lived there, the animals we had. My sister and my brother and I had a parakeet. I remember the parakeet. I remember the cat, and I think we had a cow. I'm not sure, but my memory is living here in New Albany and growing up. I even remember the lady that lived in front of us, the Kilpatricks lived in front of us, and I called her, if there were teeth that need to be pulled, she pulled our teeth. A wonderful lady. I also remember, I think it was called the Marymobile. And this Marymobile traveled the neighborhood selling popsicles, ice cream sandwiches, and I remember the Marymobile. As a matter of fact, we didn't have I called it a cul-de-sac, but we lived at the end of the road. And children would gather in the neighborhood to buy ice cream and whatever the man was selling. And I can remember him wearing a white hat, and I think a white coat. But this machine was round, and how it worked, I don't know, but it played music. And when he came, the children gathered to buy whatever ice cream, whatever kinds of ice cream he was selling. I can't remember why the machine was called the Marymobile. I can hear music, but the music that that came from the machine, I can't remember, but I can hear there was music. And I just remember, for some reason, we called it the Marymobile. One of the churches was Hall's Chapel, Golden Gate, Church of God. I don't think I can remember any other churches in the neighborhood. Oh, there were stores. I forgot. No, there were stores. Let me backtrack. I remember 2 stores. One, I don't know the name of the store, but I do know the name. The owner of the store was Mrs. Hill. I can't remember her first name. As a matter of fact, her daughter was the home ec teacher at B.F. Ford. And the other store was Boo's store. So those the names of 2 stores in our neighborhood. But you know what? I can remember another store. Another store was, this lady also taught at B.F. Ford, and her name was Mary Howard. Mary Howard had, we called it the snack bar. And inside the snack bar, there was a counter where she sold ice cream and sandwiches. And then there was a jukebox. And then later on, she added to this building, and she had a hotel at some point. But you know, I keep changing my mind. That was not the first location. The first location of this snack bar, and it only became snack bar when it was on the corner of, I think, Baker and Oak Street. But when it was on Oak Street, the first store was on Oak Street. So, you know, as I talk, memories are coming back to me. When it was a snack bar, I remember her dad. And at the time, I remember going into the store one day, and he and I had an interesting conversation. And at this time, I was a junior at W.P. Daniel. And my 11th grade teacher loved William Faulkner. And I remember her dad telling me that he knew William Faulkner. So I can't remember the details of what he shared with me, but I went back to school and shared with her that I met a gentleman that actually knew William Faulkner. I know another business. Beasley's Funeral Home was in the community, and it was on the corner of, I think, Bankhead Highway and Baker Street. The area where I lived was hilly, and but this business was Bankhead Highway on the corner of Bankhead and Baker Street. But to my knowledge, none of the street names have changed. I moved away in 1987, so things have changed, but I don't think any of the street names have changed. The second house dwelling that I can remember that my family lived in, I can't remember the street, but we lived in a duplex. And then I went to the first house we lived in. I remember being in first grade. And I think the second house that we lived in, I may have been in second grade. Maybe we were there just a short while. And after moving from the duplex, we lived off South Central. And I remember I was in third grade. As a matter of fact, it's like life not full circle, but my parents now live off of Hillcrest, which is near South Central, and my husband and I live off of South Central. So it's real interesting. But I remember being in third grade and living off South Central. And then I remember my family moving where I spent, I'm going to say from third grade until I moved away to Georgia. And this was Booker Street. My father bought a home on Booker Street. And Booker Street was near Beer Ford. And as a matter of fact, there was a playground area, and then the school was, as I say, this was a hilly area. Beer Ford was on the hill, and we had a playground area, and my home was somewhat adjacent to that playground. My sister owns property. The house is no longer there, but my sister owns the land that the house was on. And sometimes we just go by there to check on the property. And just recently, a cousin of mine celebrated his 67th birthday in the gym, Beer Ford Gym. So I had an opportunity to go back to the gym, and I have not been there because after I moved away, the gym became a boys and girls club. So this was my first opportunity to go in the school since I have left the community. My mother and my father were members of two different churches. My mother was a member of Booth Chapel. And then at some point, some churches, a church was combined, and all the churches were combined into a church that is located in Cotton Plant, and it's called Flatwood Grove. And members of my mother's family attended church there. Her parents did, and many other family members. My father's church was in Ashland, and that's where members of his family attended church. But I can't remember how often. I think my mother's church, we had church there every Sunday. But I think at my father's church, I'm not sure if they had church there every Sunday, but what I do remember is Fifth Sunday. And that's when the churches came together, and people that were ministers, every minister that was a part of the denomination would come, and they were allowed to speak. So this was a long day. After service, we would go to my mother's parents and have dinner there. And what I didn't like is I'm a lot like my father. I love to talk. And the grown-ups and the men were allowed to eat first. And the ladies would serve the husbands or my uncles. And we played outside until they had finished, and then it was our turn to eat. So it was a long wait. Where Beer Ford was located, we called that south side of town. And near Highway 15, there was a community near Highway 15, we called it north side. And, I do remember community names. I remember Goose Hollow, Dumb. This is going down memory lane. But I do remember those. St. Mary, which is off of Martintown Road. Then there were some places that were not near New Albany. I remember the Red Hill community, because at one point the county schools were all consolidated. They all came to the city school, Beer Ford, and I gained new friends. after the schools were all consolidated into one. My sister is 2 years older than I am, and I remember her bringing home her first reader. I was so excited, and so was she. Neither one of us could read, but we saw the periods at the end of the sentences. So we would go through and say, there's a dot, there's a dot, and there's a dot. But her first grade teacher was a wonderful lady, and she was also my first grade teacher. Her name was Cornelia Ford, and Bea Ford was, her husband was named after her husband. But when she taught my sister how to read, my sister came home and taught me how to read also. So when I began first grade, I could read. We had a private kindergarten, and right now I didn't go, but right now I can't remember. I remember the lady's, the name of one of the daughters, but right now I cannot remember the lady's last name. But there was a kindergarten in my community. And one of those daughters' name, her name was Carrie, I think. She had 2 daughters. And I can see the youngest daughter, but right now I can't visualize what the older daughter looked like, and neither can I the teacher or her husband. But I remember their church was in the community. And when I think back, I'm not sure, but I think I'm not sure if she had it in her home, but I think the little kindergarten school was near Madaloo Church. I'm not sure, but I remember some of my friends went, but I enjoyed Mrs. Ford, beautiful lady, could sing. She taught us how to sing and dance, and I remember sitting at tables. I remember the chocolate milk, cold, if it wasn't chocolate milk, white milk, but it was in little bottles. And children don't know about that. Now they drink milk from a carton, but we had milk in glass bottles. I don't remember a lunchroom, so my mother probably prepared my lunch. But I do remember, and my second teacher's name was Mary Bramlett. And I think she taught one more year after my second grade year, and then she retired. My third grade teacher, I had an opportunity to work with her. Her name was Mrs. Ruth Hill. After I finished college, I worked away in Independence, Mississippi. When I moved back home to work in New Albany, she and I worked together. My fourth grade teacher, if I can remember correctly, was Mrs. Frances Graham. Another teacher was Geneva Wade, I think was fifth grade teacher. But Mrs. Wade didn't start the year off. We didn't start off the year with her, but she finished the year with us. I think we began fifth grade year with Mrs. Williams, and I'm not sure she had excuse me. We began the year with her, but I think we finished the year with Mrs. Wade. Mrs. Wade loved to write, and something when I remember learning how to read, I don't remember learning phonics, but Mrs. Wade taught me a skill that how to use a pronunciation key, and that's where phonics came into play in my life. And I have been a classroom teacher once, but that is something that I've taught when I've taught students that had not been taught to read with phonics. I taught them how to use the pronunciation key, and it's so vital to when you come to multi-syllable words, bringing them together as one word. Another teacher, Mrs. Mary Howard, who owned the snack bar, was maybe 6th and 7th grade teacher. 8th grade teacher, I think, I'm not sure. She may have taught me 7th and 8th grade. I'm not sure. Oh, Mr. Gibson, Arias Gibson, was my 8th grade teacher. And then 9th grade, I had an opportunity to be taught by someone that didn't look like me. We had our first white teachers in the school, 2 wonderful gentlemen, and he was also my homeroom teacher, Mr. Little. And I think he and the other gentleman were both from Oxford, Mississippi. And I also remember, instead of getting a report card for the first time, technology, I think, was coming into place into schools, but I remember getting my report card was computerized. Mr. Little taught math, was my math teacher, a wonderful teacher. Then 10th grade, my homeroom teacher was my neighbor who lived across from me. Her name was Mrs. Gibson. And then 11th grade, the schools were, Beer Ford was closed, and we were all for high school, I completed 11th and 12th grade at W.P. Daniel. But I've had some wonderful teachers in my life. I always loved to read, and I still enjoy reading. I remember the first person to integrate W.P. Daniel was Calvin Berry, and Calvin Berry lived in the Martintown community. Knew his father and mother and all his brothers and sisters. Mr. Henderson, who taught me at W.P. Daniel, who was I think he was my homeroom, 11th grade homeroom teacher. And he also taught me American history and government. He taught part-time at W.P. Daniel and part-time at B.F. Ford, and he was the course teacher. We also had counselors from Oxford, Mississippi. A counselor, and his wife was a librarian. But those are the teachers that I can remember that were before total integration of school. What I remember about integration, what they did first, they integrated the elementary grades. All elementary grades went to, was the first step. And the second step was to close B.F. Ford, and we all went to one school, one high school. And at the time at at Ford, we had all grades. We had 1st through 12th grade. We didn't have a middle school. But at the time that I was there, they did build a new addition to Ford, and that new wing was elementary, was 1st grade through, I think, 5th grade. No, maybe, no. 1st grade through 6th grade. And then 7th through 12th grade was in the old building. My sister was the last graduating class from that school. And then after that, then we were all transferred to W.P. Daniel. And believe it or not, I didn't learn to drive until after I had finished college. But Gwendolyn Norwood, met her in 1st grade, was in 1st grade with her, and she had her driver's license, so her parents allowed her to drive us to school. So Gwen, her sister Paulette, and I rode to school together. She was the designated driver. Shadydale Park was built because I remember an end of the school activity, and we went to the park. We could walk from Ford to the park that was built, Shadydale Park, and there were activities. I think you call them merry-go-rounds, slides and swings, and they had a basket. I'm trying to think, was there a basketball court? I know there was a swimming pool. So those were, that was first grade. And believe it or not, some of the pool is not there any longer. But I think they have filled the pool in, and there are basketball courts there. But I'm not sure. I know there are swings there. But that was a part of our community. Believe it or not, I learned how to swim underwater, but this was, I'm thinking maybe 10th grade. Gwen Norwood, her sister Paulette, Juanita, and who is the clerk here in the museums, her aunt, Sarah Garner, Janice Kennedy, Mary Joyce Simmons, and most of the names that I called, we were all in first grade together. And one day, after I moved back, I was just thinking about, could I remember everybody that was in my first grade class? And I think I did pretty good remembering most of them. One person that was in first grade with me is now a minister, and I just happened to see him at Walmart, and I was telling him, calling the names. He and I sat together, and we were reminiscing, and I was calling the names of people that were in our first grade class. So, but first grade was good. I loved first grade. I loved school. In the community that I grew up in, we were family. I was encouraged, loved, supported. No one locked their doors. Clothes hung on the lines. Went to church. Never did spend the night with any of my friends, but we were in one another's homes. We were always in someone's home. I felt just love. There was there, but how can I say it? Learning change sometimes. Sometimes we resist change, and change can be good. And when I went to W.P. Daniel, didn't know any of the students. And as I say, I knew one teacher, and that was Mr. Henderson, and that was because he had been worked at our school. It wasn't, I didn't feel like, it was a learning experience where I was learning people that didn't want me there, and people of color. Some were okay, but there were many did not want us there. But it was an interesting experience. It was nothing. There were activities of Be Forward was home and family. And there were so many things that I had looked forward to that we did in the black school, that when we went to the white school, I didn't feel like that was home. My 12th grade year, things were better. We were getting to know, the whites and blacks were getting to know one another better. But I didn't feel like that I was wanted. But I got to know, I had some great teachers there. I took Spanish 1 and 2. And I remember at the end of the year, my 12th grade year, she shared that Jackson State had a scholarship. So, she was looking out for her students. And I also remember my biology teacher was, can't remember his first name, but Whedon was his last name, a good teacher. One person, I think she's deceased, Mrs. Atkins, was my 12th grade English teacher. But it was a learning experience. We were learning how to live one another as a community, as a whole, instead of a divided city. And many times change is one of the best things that could have happened. And when they integrated schools, my thought about it was, and after experiencing going to school with whites, one thing I do know, and this is not only with integration, the law can legislate, but it cannot change the heart of a man. That's the difference. And I think that the more that we work together, we became, some of the students there, I have seen since I have moved back as adults and have met their children. I also remember when I taught at Ford, I wrote an article, and someone that was in a grade, she was, I think I was 12th, and maybe she was 11th grade, but she sent me the article with a note, and I thought that was very nice of her. But she remembered me from being in school. When she read that, she thought about her children. But it was challenging. But I think differences is what bring us together. Learning about me and all about me, and me learning about someone else. If we don't communicate, communication is so vital. Talking. And as I say, you learning about me and me learning about you, experiencing culture. We have, there will always be problems. That's a given. But we're not where we were, and we are moving forward. And I have made, and one thing about it, when you look at me, you're going to see my color, but that's not what's important. What's important about me is my character. My character. And a person's character can bring a person to you, or he can push you away. And I hope with me, it'll bring you closer to me. John Lewis said something. He talked about getting into good trouble. And integrating schools was good trouble. And good trouble is making us a better community. So what maybe was a challenging time, we're so much better than we were before. And we're getting better because we're communicating, we're doing things together. We're not, the separation not like it was. We're living in communities together where you have a black community, a white community. There's more inclusion. And that's, I'm trying to think who used that phrase, Martha Stewart. I think that's a good thing. A couple of things that you'll find out when you meet me is that my parents gave to me was the love of God, and they taught me the importance of education and how education could change my life. And they knew that there was a difference in the school, and that there was more offered at W.P. Daniel. As a matter of fact, when I finished college, my father preferred that I didn't go to a predominantly black school, that he wanted me to go to predominantly white school because he felt like they had more to offer. So I went to Northeast, Delta State, and graduate school at Ole Miss. Now, graduate school was my choice. But when I was at Ole Miss, not Ole Miss, but my first job was in Independence, Mississippi. And worked with the Title I program and met a wonderful man by the name of David Hill. David Hill was the consultant for the federal program that I worked with. And at the time I began working, my first job began in January. And they were going to transfer me to the elementary school. And he told me that he told them, if you transfer her to the elementary school, you're making a big mistake. And they kept the money there instead of transferring me to the elementary school. And Dr. Hill said this to me. He's Caucasian. And he said to me, he wanted to know my goals and ambitions. And I told him that he talked to me about going to graduate school. And he was one of the reasons why I attended Ole Miss. Now, the hardest thing I think I did with Ole Miss was registration. And he helped me with registration. But after I finished graduate school, he somewhat took on a father figure for me. He asked me after I finished graduate school, he said, do you have a boyfriend? And I told him I did, and he wanted to know where did my boyfriend live? And I said, he lives in Georgia. And he said to me, you know what? He said, I don't have any connections in Georgia. He said, but if there's any way that I can help you with a reference, please contact me. But I think that was my first relationship that I had outside of my race that was like a father figure, was him. But a lovely man. And I had a great experience at Ole Miss. As a matter of fact, one of my teachers, professor, said to me that, math professor, he said that his first year at Ole Miss was the year that James Meredith came there as a student. So, but I had a good experience at Ole Miss. Delta State was interesting in that even though they call me a hillbilly because this is a hilly area and the Delta is flat. So what was interesting too was just because you're black does not mean the cultures are the same. There was a culture here in the hills and there was a culture in the Delta. And what I thought was so interesting, I learned so much with the culture, black culture there in the Delta, with music. And also I visited a city that I like, Greenville, beautiful city. And I also did my student teaching in Rosedale, and still talking about integration and bringing families together. At Delta State, I took a class called PE in the elementary school. I was the only female and the only black in the class. This was so interesting. The class, all white athletes, and they talked, I met some of their black athletes, and they were trying to figure out, they were talking about me being the only female and only black in the class, and so the black athletes were trying to figure out what black girl is this. So finally they narrowed it down to me. But the athletes were so good to me. We had part of our class in the classroom, then we had to go into the field. They saw that I had a ride, that everything that I needed, they took care of. But it was really interesting, real interesting. And believe it or not, they called me Margaret. And that's why the black athletes didn't know me because they called me May, but the white athletes called me Margaret. The teacher, just so happened the teacher was a white female. But anyway, interesting class. My major at Delta State was elementary education. Did my student teaching in Rosedale, Mississippi. Saw a levee for the first time. Just so much that as you travel, you learn. I worked, I'm going to say, a semester, and Dr. Hill encouraged me to go to graduate school. The following, that fall, because I worked for my a semester, January to May, and then the next 4 year, instead of going to the campus, I went to Ole Miss had, I think it was South Haven, had a branch in South Haven. I went there at night, and then during the summers, I would go to the campus at Ole Miss. We never broke up, but each led a separate life, and somewhat interesting. He would come back into my life, I think, just to see who was in my life. But as I said, we never broke up. But he would always come back just to see if I had a boyfriend, if I was married. And he asked me to marry him 3 times, and the third time I said yes. The first time, it puts me in the mind of officer and a gentleman. He walks into my classroom at the end of the day and says to me, "What time does school end?" And I told him. He waited, and we had dinner in Memphis because that area is close to Tennessee. And at that time, he asked me to marry him. And I didn't say yes. Then the second time was he moved to Georgia, and he wanted to move to Oregon. And he wanted us to get married and move there. But I said no. And then the third time, I was ready. I feel like we were both ready. We were both 34 when we got married. And best friends.
How did you meet him?
Freshman in college. So, when people learn the year that we met, and when I tell them the year that we got married, they say, "I know there are lots of stories." So there are lots of stories, but good stories. Taught in Independence, and then I moved back home, and I taught here in New Albany. I taught at Mattie Thompson, and then the schools, Mattie Thompson became early childhood and first grade. But I taught at Ford. I was Title I reading teacher at Ford. And I had 2 wonderful principals, Dr. Harmon and Dr. Udy, 2 wonderful ladies. Dr. Harmon was principal at Mattie Thompson, and Dr. Udy was principal at Ford. And I had the opportunity to work with 3rd grade only, and work with a wonderful group of teachers. I think when I walk into your classroom, children, this was pull-out model, but I would go into the classrooms, but most of the time not to stay, but to pull them out. But master teachers, and I learned so much from the people that I work with. As a matter of fact, the people that I work with at Ford, we're still good friends now. And I came back after moved to Georgia before another person was like a father figure was the superintendent. Georgia, the school system that I worked in Georgia was so large. They had, I think, 90 elementary schools. Big. And I used, called Dr. Udy for references and called him. But before I moved, it was easy he was accessible. I just told his secretary, I'd like to talk with him, sit and talk, and he really had a vision for this city. And at the time, I began teaching here in New Albany. I was probably the youngest black teacher that they had, because the teachers, the older black teachers had taught me, and some of them had retired and probably getting ready to retire. So he said to me if I knew, they were recruiting, from schools. But he said to me if I knew anyone that wanted a job, he said, just let him know. But, he and I would sit and talk about his vision for the city. And then when I moved away, I called him back and I needed some information. Love Dr. Bryson. He said to me, I told him what I needed him to do. And he said something to me. He said, you know what? If you want to move back, he said, there's a job for you. So I just enjoyed him and listening to what he wanted for the boys and girls and what he foresaw in the future. Good man. So he was one of those that, like Dr. Hill, a father figure. Great man. But anyway, I've had a wonderful career and wonderful opportunities, and I've met some wonderful people in the state of Mississippi as well as in the state of Georgia. She's presently a freshman at Howard University. So she is enjoying herself. It was kind of hard, her going that far. But you know what? If you continue to hold their hands, problems is a growing experience. So far, she sends me pictures to keep me updated. And somebody asked me, was I going to say no? This is growing time. And she texted me one time, she's excited. Vice President Kamala Harris did the coin toss. Let's see, she went to Howard at one of the games. And they don't have a great football team, but they're not known for athletics. They're known for academics. I think you asked me a best friend, and her name is Carolyn Estes. She was a year ahead of me in school, but our friendship developed when I was a freshman in college. She and my first husband became good friends, like brother and sister, and our relationship just began there, and we're still good friends today. She's one of those that I don't have to talk to you in a year and a month, but a telephone call, she's there. Very smart, very beautiful person, very talented. She and my sister are very loving, giving people. And my mother and my dad sacrificed everything for me and my brother and my sister. My sister was something like, well, she and I alike but different. I think she mothered everybody, even my mother and my dad. She'd mother you too. But I thank God for all the experiences that He has allowed me to have. And my friends in Georgia, the ladies that I work with, are like sisters now. Dr. Udy, Dr. Hill, Dr. Harmon, Dr. Bryson, and every principal that I had worked in Georgia. I thank God they saw skills and they had respect for the skills that God had blessed me with, and they allowed me to be creative. And I've just been allowed to do so much. I've just had fun, a good time. You work long hours and you work hard, but when you enjoy what you do, it makes a difference. It works a difference. But I have had a wonderful career. I've had a wonderful life. I'm still enjoying life. But I'm still looking forward to more. And the museum, I'm excited about the museum. Pilot, I've joined the Pilot Club because my father, his motto was, never let anybody out-nice you. And he believed that we should live our lives serving, and he did. And I thought about, Jesus said, I come to serve and not to have you to serve me. So I'm just excited. COVID put a damper on our lives, but God is making a masterpiece out of that mess.